The film opens with a man named Caleb flying a drone over the lake, which almost hits Teresa in the face while she is reading a book. She gets scared and scolds him for it. She then goes to her cabin to see her cousin, Jessica, who is not feeling well. Teresa calls her, but she does not respond as she is in a deep sleep. Teresa then decides to sit in a nearby chair and starts reading a book again. Suddenly, Jessica wakes up and randomly starts reciting the lines Teresa is reading, which scares Teresa. Jessica's voice grows deeper as she begins screaming the lines. Suddenly, she stops and collapses to the ground. Teresa rushes to Jessica's side and watches as she starts vomiting before passing out. As Teresa tries to listen to Jessica's heartbeat, Jessica suddenly wakes up, grabs Teresa by the neck, and violently rips off her scalp by pulling on her braid. Meanwhile, Caleb is in the lake, peeing when an injured, bloody Teresa arrives and is shocked to see she's covered in blood. Jessica also appears, drops off Teresa's scalp, and grabs the drone. She then slams her face into the drone and falls into the water. Caleb immediately goes after her to save her, but he is also pulled deeper into the water. The water turns red with his blood, and his head shoots out of the water, landing on the pier next to Teresa. A fully possessed, Deadite Jessica rises from the water as the title card also emerges from the trees behind her. Evil Dead rises. Cut to one day earlier, where we meet our main character, guitar technician Beth, in a club's restroom. Beth takes a pregnancy test and discovers she's pregnant. Elsewhere, Beth's sister Ellie is a tattoo artist living in Los Angeles with her 3 kids, aspiring DJ Danny, activist Bridget, and little Cassie, who has a fascination with death, including carrying around her favorite doll, Stephanie. Beth arrives at the apartment, and it's clear that she and Ellie haven't spoken in a while. Ellie reveals that the building is going to be knocked down in a month, forcing the family to move. She also opens up about her husband. Jay recently left her, something she tried to share with Beth months ago, but Beth never returned her calls. Ellie sends the kids out for pizza, and the 2 sisters start talking. As Beth is about to tell her sister the reason for her visit, a powerful earthquake hits. Meanwhile, down in the building's parking lot, the kids have returned with pizza but are forced to drop it as they take cover from the quake. They look at the fallen pizza and just give up on it. Danny notices a hole in the ground created by the quake, leading to a sealed-off bank vault. Despite Bridget's insistence that Danny not touch anything, he heads into the hole and starts searching around. Hidden in the vault, he finds a box that once belonged to several priests, filled with letters and several vinyl records, which is convenient since Danny has a record player. Continuing to search, Danny finds a small tomb surrounded by dozens of hanging crosses. Danny also finds a hole in the tomb and pulls out a book which he takes with him. Upstairs, Ellie and Beth try calling the kids, but the quake has messed up the cell service. Ellie decides to ask her neighbor Gabe if she can borrow his car to search for her kids. Just as they're about to head out, the elevator dings, and the kids finally return. In Danny's room, he and Bridget discuss whether they can sell the book to help the family. As Danny tries to open it, the sharp teeth holding the book shut cut him. A few drops of blood fall onto the book, which quickly absorbs them, causing the book to open on its own. Danny flips through the book, which depicts several drawings of murder, torture, and dismemberment. Bridget gets freaked out, slams the book closed, and demands Danny return it in the morning before leaving the room. Danny continues looking through the book and pulls out the records he found in the box nearby. By playing the first record, we learn they're the recordings of Father Marcus Littleton, the library keeper at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Littleton brought the book in hopes the church will grant them approval to translate it. Danny plays the second record. It begins with Father Marcus Littleton talking about events from 1923. He mentions that the church rejected their idea, so he and 2 others, Canon Damian Shanahan and Father Hugo Cortez, decided to secretly translate the book on their own. Littleton starts reciting a translated passage from the book, which is a resurrection spell. This is a dangerous and ominous start, as resurrection rituals are often associated with dark forces. Danny tries to stop the record player, but it continues playing by itself. As the chanting intensifies, the book's pages flip on their own, and the scene shifts to sinister force, clearly evil, flying toward the building. Meanwhile, Ellie heads down to the basement to do some laundry. As the elevator doors open, she's suddenly attacked by an unseen force. The elevator is jerked upwards several floors before stopping abruptly, throwing Ellie to the ground. Moments later, Ellie regains consciousness and tries to force open the elevator doors but freezes when she hears growling behind her. Before she can react, a cable wraps around her neck, lifting her off the ground and strangling her. Ellie manages to lift herself up for some leverage, but more cables appear, digging into her skin and contorting her body. She cries out in agony. The power goes out in the building and, back in the apartment, Beth and Cassie realize that Ellie is missing. As Bridget lights candles, Ellie comes back to the apartment, now possessed by the demons known as Deadites. She begins throwing eggs onto a frying pan, some of which are filled with blood. Ellie starts speaking in a calm voice about cutting her kids open and climbing into them before she starts to crawl after them. She then vomits all over the floor before the real Ellie manages to speak and begs Beth to not let the demons take her children. Ellie then collapses, apparently dead. A short time later, Beth tells Gabe and Fonda what happened, and Gabe asks everyone to pray. Gabe suggests using an old fire escape located on the north side of the building to get some help. Fonda reminds him they can only reach it by going through one of the condemned units, 82, which is currently locked up. Gabe and Fonda leave and start trying to break into Unit 82 but can't make it. Fonda suggests they use his shotgun to break through the locks. Back in the apartment, Beth tearfully says goodbye to her sister but is startled when Ellie sits up. Touching her, Beth realizes she's burning up, and with Danny's help, they take her to the tub. Ellie begins to convulse, jumping out of the water onto the ceiling where she screeches before falling back into the water. A fully transformed Deadite, Ellie climbs out of the tub and lunges at Beth and Danny, who run out of the bathroom. Deadite Ellie stumbles out of the bathroom with a large shard of glass in hand and attacks Beth, stabbing her through the hand. She then grabs a tattoo gun and lunges at Bridget. Deadite Ellie cuts Bridget's cheek with the needle and kisses the wound with her infected tongue, just as Danny knocks her away with a chair to the back. Gabe suddenly enters the apartment and Ellie immediately lunges onto him, and the two stumble out into the hallway. Chopping down onto his face, Ellie rips his eyeball out, and she spits it out directly down the throat of one of the other teens who live on the floor. Beth quickly locks the door and chains the door closed. Beth looks through the peephole, sees Ellie run by chasing a kid, and then sees that same kid get yeeted across the hall and smash into a wall, dying instantly. A still alive Gabe appears and bangs on the door for help, but Ellie runs up behind him and rips out his neck. Fonda arrives with a shotgun and manages to get a few shots on Ellie, but it doesn't stop her. Instead, Ellie attacks and kills him. Meanwhile, Bridget realizes that Ellie looks exactly like the drawings in the Book of the Dead and turns on Danny for stealing it. A fight breaks out, but Beth steps in to break it up, and Danny takes her to show the book. Meanwhile, Bridget leaves Cassie alone in the living room and heads to the kitchen to check her cheek. As black ooze pours from Bridget's nose and eyes, we cut to the Book of the Dead, showing an image matching her transformation. Bridget begins vomiting up flies, black beetles, or roaches. Deadite Ellie begins singing, catching Cassie's attention. Cassie walks over to the door and asks if Ellie's okay. Ellie lies, claiming she's no longer sick and that Cassie's father is waiting outside, wanting her to open the door. Cassie unlocks it, and Ellie grabs her by the throat. Cassie screams, and Beth and Danny rush to the door, rescuing her. Beth then sends Danny and Cassie to her room while she goes to check on Bridget in the kitchen. There, she finds Bridget perched on the counter, eating glass, fully transformed into a Deadite. Bridget lunges at Beth, who immediately trips and falls to the ground. Bridget grabs a cheese grater and grates Beth's leg. Danny shows up after hearing the commotion, and Bridget chases after him. Bridget chases Danny into a room, where she spots Cassie holding Stephanie and lunges at her. Bridget pulls the staff out of her head and collapses onto the ground, dead. Danny places a blanket over Bridget's body and ties her up. Beth enters the room and demands to listen to the final vinyl, as it might contain a way to stop all of this. She starts playing the third record. The record plays, and the Father Littleton says the only way to stop the Deadites is to completely destroy the body they're possessing. Meanwhile, Deadite Ellie has found a way into the vents and makes her way into the apartment. Unaware that it's Ellie, Danny and Cassie investigate the sounds coming from the vents and don't realize Bridget is following them. Following the vents sounds to the room, Danny spots Bridget before they enter, and he stabs her in the stomach. Cassie hides under a nearby couch. Bridget flies at Danny, dragging him all the way into the kitchen, pulls the knife out of her stomach, and stabs Danny through the bicep, pinning him to the counter. Bridget then vomits up a lot of blood onto Danny, which definitely is going to infect him, and stabs him in the chest. Just as she does this, Danny uses an aerosol can to light Bridget on fire. Meanwhile, in the room, Ellie drops from the vents and attacks Beth, throwing her out of the room. Ellie jumps on Beth, pins her to the ground, and smells that she is pregnant. Ellie places her hand on Beth's stomach to rip out the baby, but Cassie slides a large pair of scissors hidden under the couch to Beth, who uses them to stab Ellie in the face. Beth and Cassie leave the apartment, grab Fonda's shotgun, and attempt to break into Unit 82 but are interrupted by Ellie. After shooting Ellie, all of the dead neighbors awaken as Deadites and start chanting, "Dead by dawn, evil dies tonight." Beth and Cassie decide to take the elevator after Cassie realizes that Ellie's keys were caught in the door, preventing it from moving. As the elevator heads down, it starts to fill with blood, while Deadites Danny, Ellie, and Bridget fuse into a single creature called Marauder. Beth and Cassie attempt to escape the elevator through the escape hatch, but Marauder appear. The elevator reaches the ground floor, and Beth and Cassie are spit out of the elevator along with the blood. The two rushes to the car trigger the parking gate to open and attempt to drive off, but the car gets caught in a hole created by the quake earlier. The Marauder appears and crawls toward the car, but Cassie and Beth jump out before it reaches them. The parking gate starts to close, and Beth and Cassie make a break for it, both diving as it closes. Beth makes it across, but Cassie is dragged back into the parking garage. She breaks the gate and re-enters the parking garage. Meanwhile, the Marauder has dragged Cassie into Fonda's van, start tree cutter machine, and is about to chop off Cassie's head, but Beth interrupts the attack by shooting the Marauder. Cassie runs and hides under the truck as the Marauder sets its sights on Beth. The Marauder activates a wood chipper and tries to pull Beth in, but Cassie manages to turn it off. Beth grabs the chainsaw and slices into Ellie, Bridget, and Danny, forcing them into the wood chipper as Cassie turns it back on. Beth looks on in remorse as she is forced to kill her sister, niece, and nephew, but she ultimately throws Deadite Ellie's head into the wood chipper. Cassie cries over the loss of her family, but Beth comforts her and takes her out of the building. The next day, on the 5th floor of the building, we see Jessica, start of the film, exit her apartment and make her way to the basement. After calling Teresa to let her know she's on the way to meet her, she notices all the blood on the floor. Suddenly, the unseen entity moves toward her and Jessica screams. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more interesting movie recaps.